Alright, welcome guys to another video. In this video we're gonna go over the Summoner PvE DPS. I'm gonna be showing you guys how to play it, single target rotation, AoE rotation, and I'll be explaining the build we go over, why I take certain things and what to take and what to avoid. So let's get started. We're gonna begin with the rubies. The last ruby grid is very easy for the Summoner. We're going to take these Thaumaturgists, all of them. It's going to increase our damage dealt, and it's going to increase our blood bank here, our resource basically. Also increases our healing, but that doesn't matter for PvE DPS. We're also going to take Bloodstorm. Now Bloodstorm is something that will confuse some people. This is going to increase the amount of blood that you generate from your healings by 25%, but it also states that it includes your Bloodlust effect stat. As we can see from Bloodlust, it heals you from every time you deal damage or that you deal healing, basically. That means that healers having this ruby are going to have 50% chance on this because they heal themselves, so it's already doing the ruby. Plus, your healings also heal again via the Bloodlust stat. So you have a 50% because every heal you do procs twice. That doesn't matter for us, I'm just explaining it in general. We're just taking this because our damage is always bloodlusting if we are damaged, of course. If we're full health, then this ruby does not work. But if we are damaged, then we're going to be having this as an effect. And it's going to generate more blood. Well, a chance to generate more blood. And that's it, that's all we do in this grid. We don't need anything else. Moving forward to the second grid, we're going to take the rubies that increases our pet's damage, makes it apply also a damage over time, which is a very good one, and then some impending doom, which is kind of lackluster, but we have the rubies for it, so why not? So impending doom is going to make him we're going to be applying a debuff on our targets with our Hold of Death and life taps. Hold of Death and life taps, these are these ones, so the upgraded version of Vampirism, and Hold of Death is the one we're basically spamming like a minigun. And for every debuff on the mob, our pet will consume that one debuff, only one stack, and deals bonus damage. It's kind of a waste because it stacks up to 5, as you can see, but it only uses 1 every time your pet attacks, so you get way more of these debuffs than you can use. And if you lower the rank, it doesn't lower the amount of stacks, but it lowers the damage. It adds to it. So it's a very minimal buff, but it's really not that important. If you lack rubies, I would say skip on these 3, impending doom. That's gonna save you 3 rubies already. Now moving forward, we're going to take vigor, of course, because vigor is the most important thing you can do. Supremacy, you could take them, you could not. It depends whether your gear is now full tier 3 and you are stuck on supremacy. You have way too much, like me. I have right now 782, I see, and that's the minimum. I cannot go lower because everything has tier 3, so I cannot change those stats. So my rubies would be a waste because you don't want to go above 750. That's the soft cap for supremacy. But if we want to get to this determination and brutality rubies, so we either have to go via Lamia, which is going to give us an extra blood every second while we're in Dark Veil, which could be pretty good. Or we take we're gonna go for Lamia. If you do lack Supremacy, go with Supremacy, of course. This is by no means any good. I consider this a small utility thing for myself, but this is not good for DPS. This doesn't contribute anything. If you want to contribute anything to your damage, take Supremacy rubies. Well, actually saying that, I'm going to take Supremacy rubies, because even if it's very minimal, it's still going to contribute to increasing my damage, while this does not. Then we're going to go take our determination, because extra stats is extra damage, brutality as well, very good stat. Then we're going to go for the vitalism rubies, that increases your stamina. We're going to go through Blood Feast, because this is a very good spell to do before combat, to stack up our blood pool to the maximum. Take all of these, and only rank 1 Bloodletting. Increasing the rank of Bloodletting only decreases its cooldown, which is a waste of time because the area exists for 22 seconds. It's even saying that in the description. So you can loop this non-stop, even when rank 1. So there is no reason to take rank 2 or 3. So those would be wasted rubies. And then I'll take Step Through Shadows because I like to have it teleport with me, which only works on your target, of course, but it still is a teleport, can save you sometimes. And it's going to apply a vulnerability effect as well on a group of packs. So when you're attacking and your tank is pulling a pack and you're going to start DPSing, you can do Strat to Shadows, which is also off your global cooldown, so it's very effective to use. You will be applying mass vulnerability on every single mob around 4 yards I see. That's very small, but it's within 4 yards of the target that you do this, and you get 5 extra blood. So you get, basically, you're capping out your blood for sure to be able to apply everything you have to apply and use your blood there, which is usually volatile infection and ritual of plague. But we'll get to the rituals in a bit. And I would say this grid will be finished, and we took everything that we should be taking. And then the first grid is where we're going to be taking almost everything. We're going to take dehydration, which is going to make our Howl of Death, make it so that our life taps can be cast instantly, which you will be doing all the time during combat. Determination and Vigor Rubies, of course, very needed. Generates extra blood during combat, every second one, that's very good. Here's the rituals. So there's 2 difference of rituals, and I'm going to take Pain rank 2 only, going to take Plague rank 3 only. Now Pain, that's the one you use for single target. Well, in the end you're going to be rotating them anyway, so it doesn't matter in the long-term fights. What matters here is which one you start with. When we start with the Ritual of Pain, it's a single target apply, so it only applies your dots on your main target, and that's it. If you have it rank 1, like so, it's only going to apply Neurotoxin and Avid Shadows. Now, a lot of summoners and all players, returning players, will remember this as the spell that people use to spam, and when you reach 5 stacks, you would apply a 3-second stun that has no diminish, and you would spam this as a summoner non-stop, rotating while your dots are ticking down, and you would Dark Green roll yourself to heal up, while your target couldn't do shit. That's exactly what it is, but they removed the stun, and it's now more of a damage type spell than a CC. And it stacks up to 50 times, increases your damage per X amount of percent per stack. That will go up as we rank up this ability, but the point is you'll be instantly applying these 2 by just using Ritual of Pain. So that means it's 2 global cooldowns in 1 global cooldown. So you're saving yourself a global cooldown so that you could be doing other things like spamming life taps and Howl of Deaths in between. If we do it to rank 3, it's also going to apply Wandering Fever. This is the pretty good damage ability, especially when it procs, like when it pops at the end. It's going to do extra damage. It's also a dot, as you can see here. But the interesting thing is that it explodes when it runs out, when the timer expires, and then it deals a lot more extra damage. Now, rank 3, I'm avoiding this because it does apply Volatile Infection, which is your AoE ability you'll be casting. But it's only going to be applying it on your main target, and it's not going to make it spread to other targets as the normal Volatile Infection does. And it also increases your blood bank cost from 6 to 9, and that is why I also am avoiding it, because it's a very good starter for single targets that it only costs 6 instead of 9. Now, if you're experienced with that and you already played around with Summoner and you're comfortable with it having being 9 blood bank, and you want that extra Volatile Infection, which could basically save you a global cooldown because you don't have to apply it in a single target, then go for it. And I guess this is also viable. You could do that, but that's not the way I'm used to playing. So it might actually be better to make it a rank 3, but I will not for now, out of just comfortability reasons. But it might be better because it's saving you a global cooldown. But I would have to practice on that as well. And then the other ritual of Plague, is the AoE ability. So when you apply this on your main target, it's also going to be applying all those dots on everything around you. So this is a very good AoE one. It's applying Neurotoxin when it's rank 1. Rank 2 makes it apply Avid Shadows as well. As you can see, Ritual of Pain had those 2, had both of them in first Ruby. This one has it only in rank 1, rank 2, because this ability does not apply Volatile Infection, because that would be overkill. So rank 3 makes it also apply Wandering Fever, and that is why this one is required to be rank 3, because you'll be applying every single dot that you have except for Volatile Infection to everything in the vicinity. On your target, of course, 8 yards around your target. I see it caps out, actually. They capped it out to 5 enemies. As you can see with the description, you apply the following effect to the target and 5 enemies within 8 yards. So it's capping out just like Warrior's Tramp has to 10 targets. They capped this out to 5 targets. I didn't even know that, but now we know that. But that's why Volatile Infection is going to be your main AoE ability, which we'll get to in a bit. We're taking the Assisting Rubies, Ritual of Blood, and Trail of Pain. These are basically the same thing, but one is for Ritual of Pain, the other is for Ritual of Plague. These are going to be helping you get extra blood, and it's going to decrease the cooldown of those abilities. Now, one thing to keep in mind, because for some bosses that matters, Ritual of Pain does hurt yourself, so you sacrifice some health, which is 15% according to this Ruby. It is because of the ruby that you apply the damage as well. And Ritual of Plague does not self-damage yourself. It's important to know for some kind of boss in compasses, the woodcutter thing, so that you know to avoid that, and you have to apply dots yourself manually. Then we take Desolator and we take Plague Doctor because of those are just flat damage increases. There's nothing you can do wrong with that. Poison damage 15% and periodic damage 15%, which is damage over time. We take the Evil Fate, which is going to give us a 10% chance to get the Sepulchral Chill effect. Which means by default our Hall of Death costs 6 blood to cast. When we have that procced, that buff from Sepulchral Chill, it's only going to cost us 1. So you're going to save 5 blood every time doing that. And we're going to try to focus on only using Hall of Death when we have that active as well. But we'll get to that during the rotation. Sepulchral Chill here makes us get Sepulchral Chill buff, so which is what Evil Fate was explaining. Every 6 seconds combat, every 4 seconds of combat, every 2 seconds of combat. So we're gonna get it regardless every 2 seconds of combat, but we're gonna get extra ones at a 10% chance every time we deal damage with Avid Shadows and Wandering Fever, which is basically your dots that you'll be rotating all the time. Seal of Death is something that racks up very quickly whenever you deal damage with Life Tap and Hall of Death, which is what you spam non-stop like a minigun. And I'm only taking rank 2 because rank 3 only makes it stack up to 10 times to 15 times. But from what I have seen when you're DPSing, it never goes above 10 stacks. So this ruby would be wasted because it never reaches 15 stacks or above 10 essentially. And as you can see, the damage doesn't increase either, so that would be a waste of ruby. Now the advanced genetics is the one that increases your volatile infection AoE. So your volatile infection right now would just apply to one target and it would deal AoE radiating damage doing that. Taking this ruby is going to make it apply to 2 more enemies, so basically 3 targets. Your main target and then 2 more targets. And then all of those will radiate their AoE. Kinda like the old school summoner thing. I have rank 1 right now. If I use this on this guy, it's going to be applying to the others as well, as you can see. Which would not be the case if you had no ruby, because it would only apply to 1. And they radiate AoE all the time while they're taking their own damage. Now taking extra rubies of this is going to make it increase to 3 targets, so it goes from 2 to 3, so the efficiency already decreases in your rubies. Now consider how many mobs there are in each pack when you do your content, compasses, dungeons, and see what is most efficient, because it goes up to 4. That means 5 targets, because don't forget you have still your main target that you focus. I usually stick to 3, so I have 4 targets that I apply Volatile Infection to every time I recast it on another target. But it also increases the cost of your blood. As you can see, it increases it from 2 to 3 to 4 blood. So basically the amount of extra enemies there are. So it's pretty efficient to do this. And as you can see, it also says does not affect the Ritual of Pain ability. That is what I meant with the Ritual of Pain does not apply the Volatile Infection AoE. And that is why I'm avoiding the rank 3 ruby, because I don't think it's really worth it. Unless for single target damage only, which could be because then you're saving a global cooldown, but that is extra detail. Now I'm gonna save this on rank 2 and see how many rubies we have left after that, because I'm sure most people generally will be able to make this build that way. Grim Reaper effect is going to give us stacks that increases our damage over time abilities. And we'll have this active all the time, except for at the beginning. So every time we deal damage with Life Tap and Hall of Death, we're gonna get this Grim Reaper effect, which stacks up 3 times, and for every stack we have, well, it increases by 10%, then rank 2 20%, and then rank 3 30%. Until the amount of their stacks, as you can see, the description is quite weird. While this effect is active, damage dealt by Neurotoxin, Avid Shadows, and Wandering Fever is increased by 30% until the amount of their stacks on the target changes. This is what confuses me, because these stacks are not on the target. They're on you, and they don't change because they're consumed every time you apply the rituals, because they essentially apply 3 damage over times. So then these are consumed every time. So I'm assuming that when you consume them to apply this, it's going to take effect. But the translation is pretty weird, so I cannot give you a guarantee on that. Terminal stage is the pop that I mentioned before on the Wandering Fever. Then we have Toxicosis, which is using Neurotoxin increases the number of effect levels by 1, which means that every time you use Neurotoxin, it's going to increase the stacks by 1. But there's another ruby that will increase our stacks as well every time we deal damage to it. Here it is, Necrosis, which is right below it. Toxicosis and Necrosis. So Necrosis is dealing damage with Vampirism, a Life Tap, Hall of Death, Avid Shadows, Wandering Fever, and Gemotoxin, which is the dot from your pet. Increases the number of stacks of Neurotoxin by 2. So this is increasing the stacks of Neurotoxin by 2 every time you deal damage with those things. So you can imagine how fast it stacks up to 50, which is what you want to reach 50 stacks of Neurotoxin as soon as you can, because then it's going to be proccing at max value damage. Toxicosis, not so helpful. Then we got Blastment, damage dealt by Neurotoxin, Avid Shadows, Wandering Fever, Volatile Infection increases. So this ruby is just a base damage increased on your dots. Now the first ruby is the most efficient, it's 10%. Second ruby only increases by another 5%, so it's less valuable. And then the third ruby another 5%, which is 20% in total. We're taking it because we have the rubies for it. This ruby is support only, so we do not grab this. I've seen builds, and I've seen myself make this mistake as well, that I take the ruby and it doesn't work. And we also don't take acute symptoms because that's also only support aspect. And with that said, we still have 7 rubies left, so summoner build is pretty easy to make. You have a lot of rubies left, and I'm not exactly sure where you would dump them into, because everything here is for healing. Around here, healing. This is not for healing, but there's no contribution to damage here. This is support only. This is reanimation. Healing does not work in Allods Online when you're not a healer aspect. It does work when you're a support. Sometimes, rarely, but it does not work when you're a DPS. I know other games mix damage people, and then when they have the healing abilities, they're pretty good, like World of Warcraft and Final Fantasy. I know that works. It does not work in Allods Online because of the aspects. Now, there's too much to go into detail into. I just want you to know, do not take healings on a DPS aspect with the idea of I will be able to heal myself and others. That does not work unless they're percentage heals like War Mysteries and Racials. It does not work for abilities. But as you can see, there's nothing else useful to take. This one increases your speed when casting healing spells or using Blood Feast. So your Blood Feast would increase your speed, but does not increase damage. There's nothing else really to take except for the Supremacy Rubies that could be contributing to damage here. This will wipe your group in Phineas Cloistered Compass Dungeon when at the last boss everybody gets a DOT. Well, people get randomly a debuff. And he does AoEs as well. Like, he does a big AoE stomp. When you drop below 40% on that AoE stomp, your ruby here triggers. When you have that debuff and your ruby triggers, which makes it purify, and that debuff is the wrong debuff, it's wiping your party. Do not take this ruby. This is my warning to every summoner playing summoner PvE DPS and going Phineas Cloister. You have been warned, do not take this ruby. Another addition next to the one with shadow is I would not use washing with blood. It's not as bad, but it's still bad. What it does, it's going to apply snaring effect for 3 seconds to every mob around you when you do blood feast. Now, it hasn't happened not once, not twice, but maybe 100 times where I've seen a summoner use washing with blood, snares mobs around them, and the tank moves around in the pack for whatever he moves around, because he's going to pull another pack in the pack, and it makes the mob snared. When the tank moves away from a snare the mob is going to ignore aggro and is going to attack the nearest player, whatever player is in the vicinity, which is usually one-shotting that player because that player is not made to be tanking hits on compasses, and it ends up with a one-shot because it's snaring. This was the same problem with scout tanking back in the day when I was rotating my frost chance with steel rolls all the time, and it would snare the mobs together, and then melees in my party that are on top of me, and I would move away slightly from the mob. It would one-shot them randomly, and we couldn't figure out why. I know now, and that's why I'll never forget, because I found out that way. Snaring is not good in compasses. Try to avoid it, and that's why avoid this ruby when you can. If you want to take it, then go ahead, but you have been warned. You will be killing people with that thing. But yeah, the rubies are taken now. We've got all the safety things. We could take extra stuff like the extra rank of advanced genetics, and we could take Seal of Death for AoE, because I do believe on AoE it actually stacks up to 15 stacks, because your Ritual of Plague is applying so many damage ticks from these condition dots that it's insane. So that will work on AoE. That will contribute to AoE damage, I believe. But then again, it's only for your Hall of Death and Life Tap that increases the damage dealt. Now you could take side effects, which is working on DPS, but I haven't seen it very much being useful. So what it does is it applies vulnerability effect, which is the same thing that your Step of Shadows does. step to the shadows, but your Hole of Death and your Life Tap have a 45% chance to apply vulnerability effects. That lasts for only 1 second, lasts for 2 seconds, and if you're a support aspect, it lasts for way longer, but on DPS it lasts only 2 seconds, which is very little. So consider this a passive damage increase you could do for your party, not for bosses of course, but like random packs. That could do it that way, but it's only 2 seconds and there's a cooldown of 10 seconds I believe. Yeah, it cannot be applied to the same target more than once every 10 seconds. So it's very minimal. So of those 2 seconds every 10 seconds, it's going to give vulnerability effect that only increases it by 25%. So it's very random. I don't think you can time your burst with it. If you want to, you can like watch for it. So that is that. We're gonna go to the talents now, and we're gonna go for the build. So we're gonna take Vampirism and the evolution skill Life Tap to the max, because we'll be spamming this non-stop. We'll be upgrading our Hellion to rank 3 because it's the one that's gonna help us do extra damage, especially with the dot that he applies via this Ruby Gemotoxin. And then also it uses the Impending Doom effect from your Holo Def and Life Tap. These rubies also increase his base attack damage by 300%, which is quite a big amount. And I did test with the Cadaver, which is the ranged AoE pet, but I wouldn't recommend playing with it. It's fun to play with, it's nice to have extra AoE, but it's useless. The damage does not compare to the Hellion's damage, and it's just not as efficient. It works, but it's not as efficient. It also has travel time on his attack, so that's also slowing it down. It's just not made for it. They did the bad job making a variety of pets. Our Blood Aegis has been recently renewed. Now Blood Aegis is now a full-fledged actual mitigation ability rather than a applying defense, because a lot of people were confused about that and people were saying just pop Blood Aegis, you're fine. No, you weren't, because your support was already applying defense to the whole group, including you. So your Blood Aegis was useless. It did nothing, literally nothing. Now it does though. You finally get a mitigation ability. It's similar to Armor of Light from the Priest, but this time it's off global cooldown from the beginning. So it's giving you a 6 seconds long 40%, 50% or 60% mitigation. If you do it on someone else though, so you can apply this shield to other people, which is a nice thing about this, is that you're going to apply a 10% mitigation on your target. Could be nice for tanks, could be nice to help other people survive AoEs and so on. So that's pretty cool to do. We're gonna take Fear of Death because it's a crowd control, so it interrupts very nicely certain casts from mobs, which is gonna be required for compasses and sometimes raids. So do take this one, it's very good. At least rank 1. Like cooldown is cooldown, but at least have it. A Volatile Infection is our AoE ability, but we're also going to be using this on single target. So we take that rank 3 as well. Our Aspect of Assault, I don't have to explain this, please take this rank 3 or don't even bother. Neurotoxin is the dot that will be stacking up a lot, so rank 3 as well. Blood Ties we don't take, Heal Spec we don't take. Life Tap we take rank 3 because it's the evolution skill of Vampirism. We don't take Healing Injection because that's another heal, doesn't work on DPS, forget about it. Searing the same thing, heal doesn't work. Aspect of Support, we don't take that. Whole Ghostly Ward is a very good long CC, crowd control. You want to take this, take it rank 1 for now so you at least have it. And just get to the default habit where you will be precasting this whenever you're idle. So whenever you're waiting before a pack or whatever, just precast it, and then when you have extra talent points, crank it up to rank 3 because it's only 2 seconds cast time compared to a 5 second, 4 seconds. So the 2 second is worth it. It's very well, but it's costly on talent points. We're gonna take Wandering Fever rank 3 because that's the other dot. We're gonna take Dark Veil rank 1 because that makes you or your target, whoever you apply it to, completely immune to everything. There are little exceptions, but you'll learn them as you go. You'll see what works and what doesn't, but this makes you immune to all damage, and it's a self puri. It also is a puri, so it's puri and an immune in one. We're gonna take it rank 1 for now. The cooldown remains the same. By increasing it, doesn't matter. It only increases the duration of it, so it's 4 seconds, 5 seconds, 6 seconds. 4 seconds should be just fine to avoid whatever you want to avoid by using Dark Veil. Then we're taking our last 3 damage abilities. Dark Figure is the first one I would recommend rank 3 because this is increasing our damage dealt by a lot. It increases our damage dealt by 20% AC, and you recover 1 blood every other second. So that stacks with the Ruby that is already giving us 1 blood every second. So you can spam your Hall of Death non-stop while this Dark Figure is active. It's insanely good. And your Hellion does more damage as well. Then we have Lash of the Doomed, which can be comboed with Dark Figure, which is pretty nice. Lash of Doom used to be really great. People would use Dark Veil to bring themselves to 1% and then Lash of the Doom, because that would increase its efficiency by the maximum possible. Of course, that was broken, that was too easy, so they removed the ability to do it now while you are having Dark Veil. But it still is a worthy ability for single target damage, so it is good. And then you have Dark Palm as well, which is basically your AoE version, but you cannot use this together with Dark Figure. So consider Dark Figure your single target burst, consider Dark Palm your AoE burst. Now this is going to make a hand spawn that attacks in the frontal cone attack your enemies every 3 seconds, next rank every 2 seconds, next rank every 1 second. So it attacks, it's basically doing 100%, 200% extra more damage by just increasing the rank. So I would really recommend this on rank 3, because it's just a very good AoE ability to do. As you can see, we still have plenty of talent points left, so I'm gonna go with the Lash rank 3, I'm gonna go with the Ghost World rank 3, and then we have 3 more left. Well, I'll grab the Fear, so it's less cooldown on the Fear. The Dark Veil is only 4 seconds it is, but once you get to know the mechanics a bit, and you'll know when something happens that you know will kill you or someone else, simply use the Dark Veil and you have 4 seconds of immunity, which is way better than the Blood Ages, of course, but it is perfect. We'll go ahead and learn this. Now, for DPS, I'll be explaining first single target. Let me explain first the mechanics here of the summoner. So with all these rubies taken, as you can see, we'll have 2 built-in visuals from the game. This is not an add-on, that's a built-in game thing, so that's pretty nice. They look cool as well. So what happens here is the left side is showing our insta-cast or life tap, which is what this ruby is doing, Evil Fate. So with the 10%, we get a blood reduction or a Hall of Death. If it does not, then it grants us dehydration effect, and this procs every time you deal damage with Avid Shadows and Wandering Fever. So it all comes down to your dots. Your dots are giving you the resources that you need to spam Hall of Death and Life Tap. The Hall of Death and Life Tap is your 2 combo here. I have this on 1 too, because you're going to be spamming this non-stop at the same time. Now, Hall of Death is your ability that says as well ignores the global cooldown. It triggers global, no it doesn't. It ignores global cooldown. That means that you can do this at the same time. Well, it has its own cooldown, of course, but you can do this at the same time as Life Tap. So it ignores each other's global cooldown, as you can see. This is the Hall of Death animation. This is the Life Tap animation. This is within the global cooldown duration, as you can see. Now, we're never going to be doing this really because our blood bank always needs to have some blood to be ready to use our rituals and our volatiles and factions. But what I want you to be aware of here is that we're going to be stacking up our stacks here. First thing, you're gonna have to get in combat, and then as you know, you're gonna get blood every second in combat, and these things will build up in combat as well. Also, Hall of Death itself is going to apply this dehydration effect, which is the insta-cast of Life Tap. So we got our Hall of Death complementing our Life Taps, and we got our Dots, Avid Shadows, and Wandering Fever also complementing both Life Taps and Hall of Deaths. Now, Life Taps can only stack up to 5 of these insta-casts, but you can only use 1 at a time, so it's going to be hard to run through them. And our Hall of Death insta-casts are only 3. So every time you do a Hall of Death, it only takes 1 away, but your blood bank only uses 1 blood. If I'm going to spam Hall of Death all the way to use all of them, you'll see that I'll be spending 5 blood, if I'm fast enough. So it's kind of hard to burn through your stacks here and get through your blood, but it still happens during combat. You'll be doing more than just that. So once you understand that, left is your Life Tap, right is your Hall of Death. This is reducing blood cost by 5. This is removing the cast time of the Life Tap. Always keep in mind to send your pet, but basically your pet is always going to go when you start combat. Now you have default keybinds here. You have shift 1 and your other shifts. I'm used to always pressing shift 1 when I start combat, so that I know that my pet is going on my target, because sometimes people are having their pets uncontrolled and their pets are attacking the wrong targets. Try to make it a habit, shift 1 or whatever keybind you like to make it send to your target, or click it if you're really that desperate to click. Try to simply send your pet to your target so that you control it at least a bit. We're gonna blood feast for the extra blood, and then we're gonna start. So Ritual of Pain, and then you can already begin spamming Hall of Death and Life Tap. You do this non-stop. You watch when your Hall of Deaths buffs are gone, and then you stop a bit with Hall of Death. As soon as they're back up, you start spamming that. As you can see, your life taps will never run out, so you can just spam that non-stop as well. Now for the dots that you will be rotating, you'll be looking at your neurotoxin. That's the one you follow the most, because neurotoxin is your lowest timer, along with wandering fever. So which one you track doesn't really matter, but you have to be checking these. And you'll be rotating your 2 rituals as soon as your neurotoxin expires. So you see that your neurotoxin stacks up to 50 stacks, and when it's 50 stacks, the damage of it is capped out. Now there's a difference between these 2 rituals, which I don't get why, but there is. Ritual of Pain is on your global cooldown, Ritual of Plague is off your global cooldown. I don't know why that is, but Ritual of Plague is my favorite for that reason. Because when you are having to reapply Ritual of Pain, you have to actually stop casting Life Tap, otherwise you keep triggering your global cooldowns and you cannot get your Ritual of Pain in there. Now when I'm gonna have to do Ritual of Plague, I don't have to stop casting Life Tap and I'll be able to just keep spamming it. And that is basically all you do for the Summoner DPS rotation. You simply keep spamming 1 and 2, your Hall of Death and Life Tap. You stop basically Hall of Death when your blood runs out. And you keep your eyes on your neurotoxin to reapply your rituals. Once you have gotten that down, you're gonna wonder, okay, but why not use the blood for your Hall of Deaths when, you know, why not use your blood for Hall of Death? Why you're slowing down DPS that way? Because we have still volatile infection, which is going to be increasing our damage. Now our damage here from Hall of Death is going to be more because we have an AoE, but that's the good thing about it. It's a passive AoE ability, and it applies, well, it adds up to single target damage. I usually apply my volatile infection after my rituals, because remember, these rubies here are helping you gain extra blood after using a ritual. So you're basically ensuring yourself that you're gonna have enough blood after using a ritual to do your volatile infection. That should be the only casting thing that you'll be doing in your rotation. Now what you could do is you could maximize your volatile infection and use it every 8 seconds, but as you can see, it's gonna get a bit more micromanaging with your volatile infections in between. But this is what you should be doing. So always try to do volatile infection every time the buff shows 2 seconds on its timer, and then look at neurotoxin to reapply your ritual. That's how you keep up your dots all the time consistently. And these are all the debuffs that you will be applying all the time, or should be applying all the time. So as you can see, I rotate both Ritual of Pain and Ritual of Plague. Now for AoE, this is the same thing, exactly the same, but you start with Ritual of Plague instead, rather than Ritual of Pain. And the difference here, as you can see, is that Ritual of Pain costs 10 blood, Ritual of Pain costs only 6 blood. So when you start with AoE, you're going to be costing more blood. So make sure that you have maxed out your blood pool with Blood Feast before that, because you want to do Volatile Infection right after that. And then as you spam number 1 and 2, or whatever you have them on, you want to go through your list of targets and make sure that you apply Volatile Infection to every target that doesn't have it. So it's going to be applying to 4 targets, then to 8 targets, then to 12 targets, etc. And it's at least smart enough to not apply to the same target twice. So it's going to prioritize mobs that don't have it already on AoE. Now the 4, 8, 12 is because of my rule here, because of the 2 rubies here. If you have all rubies or you have only 1 rubies, then your number of targets will differ. Don't forget to use Dark Palm for AoE and use Dark Figure for single targets, together with Lash of the Doomed. Now for Lash of the Doomed, try to only use it when your neurotoxin has maxed out on 50. That way it's capping out and it's sticking at the highest damage while you're casting Lash of the Doomed. That way you're making it more efficient for damage. That's basically all I can tell you guys for the PvE DPS rotation, both single and AoE, because it's pretty simple that way. It just simply requires a little bit of micromanaging your debuffs and dots while spamming your minigun combination here. Now for the stats, you're gonna want to have 1-to-1 ratio for Profit to Brutality. Now I know there's a lot of speculation about damage, and there's a lot of different formulas out there on the internet. One thing I can tell you is that if you're not sure about stats, and the 1-to-1 rotation doesn't really work right now because it's hard to get to, because with Tier 3s you're not able to change stats and whatever, there is a new calculator that I wanted to make a video about later, but this came first. I'm gonna switch the screen. There we go. On Allods.pro they added a new talents calc, And what this does is, oh no, that's for the wheels. The stats calc. What this does is it calculates your stats that you would need to run to optimize your damage. So of course you can translate this to English. And then you'll be picking probably Necromancer because a summoner, and then you go for PvE and you type in your stats here. Now I'm gonna do a video later explaining how this actually works and if it's actually working. I don't know about it yet, I'm just explaining this on the go. But you're gonna give in your stats that you basically have right now. So you give in your base values, you give in the rubies, the values of your rubies, you give in the values from your equipment, given the values from your effects like potions and so on, and that is going to give you the stats here that you should be running: proficiency, determination, mortality, luck, and supremacy. Now from friends, I know that some of these stats are already questionable compared to what they used to be running, because some classes require supremacy where the calculator says you don't need any, or at least a low amount. So it's still questionable. I still need to test it, but just so you know that's out there, there's a tool to try your stats. You give in your stats here, it's going to give you a value, and then try to copy paste that as much as you can with your gear here. That's all I can tell you about stats. For defensive stats, I would just simply say always run 999 bloodlust for PvE. You can never go wrong with that. It's always good to self-heal. Survivability, nothing, because you don't have a healer. Well, it's not as useful. You can have some, you have a healer probably. If you don't have a healer, then don't run survivability. It's useless for sure. If you have a healer, it's a good thing to do. And then about 500 quotient maximum, because it's still helping you survive one-shots, but it's not as good as it used to be. The next thing I want to tell you guys about is the world mysteries and the racial abilities. You're gonna find most of these in the other tab. No, we're not. We're gonna find these in the spell combat abilities. Now, there's a few racials out there that you will want to use. Channel of Life is my favorite to go to. I have it here on my hotkey bar, you can see. This is insane to heal your tanks. It says raid, but it also works in party, so I'm not sure what they messed up there. But you're basically putting a buff on your target that you apply this to, and it's going to heal them by 10% of their health every second for 6 seconds. But it also reduces your health by 10%. So when you do this on a friend, you're basically taking 50% of your health and giving it to them, because you have about the same amount of health. Now when you do this on a tank, they have way more health. So their 10% is a lot more valuable than your 10%. That's why the Channel of Life is so good, because your 10%, that dots basically that you're taking, is very easy for you to out heal with your bloodlust, but it's healing the tank a lot more than that he could be doing himself. There's only 1 minute cooldown as well, which I think is too little, because if you have 2 summoners, DPSs in your group, that means, which is also the maximum, that means you could try to run without a healer and simply have a tank that is being healed by DPS summoners every 30 seconds. You could assume that it's a full heal at some point every 30 seconds. Having 2 summoner DPSs, let's assume that your third DPS is a priest, then you have a lot of tools to keep your tank alive without a healer. So you have a 4 DPS setup, so it's a tank and a support, and 4 DPS players, because you don't use a healer, because you have a lot of tools to keep your tank alive. Priest has a ton of shields, as well some shields. You have the Channel of Life from the summoners. It's insane to, like, your tank is basically immortal that way. At least a warrior tank would be. So that would be a really good way to do it. Another racial you could be doing to increase your damage instead is Dark Frenzy. It increases your luck by 100. The bloodlust doesn't really matter, but you could do this together with Dark Figure to be bursting that way. Any other racial is not really worth it. World Mysteries instead. World Mysteries, you have the Purification, which is a very must. Now this is a World Mystery you get because you're a healer class. There's the Priest, there's a Druid, and there's a Summoner that has healer classes. They all have the same World Mystery, which is Purification. You will be using this a ton, like all the time, non-stop. Even if you're DPS, I don't care that you deal damage, you still should be using your utilities that the game has given you. Purification is one of these. It removes every single debuff dot that you can purify, that you can remove, because it shows in your raid interface. Use these. Put these on a simple to access reaching button. I have it on my num5 on my mouse. You're gonna have to use these. These are important. I'm saying this out of experience because I've played with people that are clicking these or didn't know about your purification. These are important to use. Make them easily available to you, put them somewhere easy to reach and use them. Learn to use them. Even if it reduces your damage by a little bit, it won't matter in the end. Mechanics go over damage. Do the mechanics first, then focus on that meter. So that is word mysteries and ratios explained. The other word mystery you could have here very well is recovery. Now the good thing about this is that ratios share cooldown, but word mysteries don't. So your purification you'll be spamming every time, every 3 seconds, whenever needed to. Your recovery is very good to off-heal allies, because it also heals 10% of your health. So that's the difference with Channel of Life here. Channel of Life heals your target by 10% of their health and reduces 10% of your health for the same duration. This one heals 10% of your health. So you could either use this as a counter for Channel of Life if you're really that desperate for healing or you have problems with blood test, then you can use Channel of Life and then the recovery after that on yourself. Or you do this as well on your tank. It's a lot less valuable than Channel of Life, of course, and it's a 3-minute cooldown instead of this 1-minute cooldown. So this is why I don't really understand the logic behind Channel of Life and its cooldown, but it is what it is. Recovery, I would mostly want to use it on friends, mostly like supports that have trouble blood testing themselves, because it's a pretty good healing ability that you can do on friends like supports. But this is under global cooldown, same for Channel of Life. So it does cost you global cooldown that you could be using for DPS, but hey, it is what it is. Keep your people alive and you'll end up with more damage as a group than that you would be doing alone in a dead group. And that's it, guys. I want to thank you so much for watching until the end. It's been a really long video. I tried to cut and slice where possible. I tried to edit everything out that I could edit out, but it's still a long video and I can't help but explain everything as informative as possible so that you will understand every single thing that's going on. If you have any more questions about the class, or you want to see a different kind of tutorial or guide about the different aspects of the game or other classes, feel free to comment it and I'll try to get to them. Again, try to subscribe as well to my channel, because I see a lot of people are watching, but a lot of those people are not subscribers, and the subscribing to the 1000 would really help forward the channel. Again, thanks guys for watching. Hope you guys learned something. See you guys next time, and I hope you have a good evening. Goodbye.